All right, guys, our next guest is one of our favorite people to speak to. What an honor. First time this year he joins us to preview one of the most stacked and exciting cards so far. Coming up, UFC 299, the one and only, the great and powerful, our good friend Luke Thomas. Welcome back to Submission Radio, man. So happy to have you back on the program, dude.
Yeah, I've got my own Bluey and who's the other one? The other kid. Bingo.
Bluey, Bingo. Yes.
Yeah.
And you kind of like
I got my own Bluey and Bingo.
Like
I've been watching a lot of Bluey. Gentlemen, I said this to them off camera. I'm going to say it on camera. The last time I was on Submission Radio, I had the amazing analysis that there was no possible way Sean Strickland could ever beat Israel Adesanya. And of course, he goes and does precisely that. And I have been stewing in my own sadness about what a poor job I've done. So I am hopeful, maybe fingers crossed, I can somewhat redeem myself with today's appearance. Thank you for having me.
I was saying to Luke, I was like, first of all, it was a great chat. Secondly, I think like 99% of people in the MMA world picked Israel to beat Sean anyway. So don't feel bad in any way. You definitely weren't the only one, us included. So it's great to have you back on, man. We've been missing you. Let's get straight into it because there's not a ton of time, but there's actually this is a stacked card, man. There's a lot of juicy fights. We'll kick it off with the main event. Sean O'Malley, Cheeto Vera, the rematch. The narrative here, man, is both guys, obviously, their improvements since the first fight, but also the way the first fight ended. And like, Sean has to this day maintained that, it was a fluke. He's still undefeated. And that's, I was watching the countdown the other day, which I don't always do, but like that's the key narrative there. Do you think that mentality, do you think he needs to accept the first loss in order to move forward and have a better fight? Or do you think brushing it off as a fluke can, in some ways, protect him mentally so that he doesn't overthink it? What's your take on this whole mentality, Luke?
I mean, the question sort of premises that there was an issue he had to accept to begin with. I mean, let's be honest. What the narrative at the time of that fight, we all lived through it, was that, hey, Sean's got some talent. He's on his way, but perhaps there were some concerns about his durability. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just this fight. The Sukumtat fight, I think, contributed to that as well as some other ones. Beyond that, he may have had some other injury reports. Also, it was approximately around this time, at least it wasn't too far, where he had it was ultimately exonerating, but he had a supplement issue with USADA. So there was a few things where you weren't sure exactly where this is going to go. I would just be honest. You can say Petr Yan won, and I wouldn't really disagree with you. I thought he did win. You can say, things went a little more favorably in one direction or another in some of his subsequent bouts. But that same criticism about a lack of durability, perhaps I am missing something. I don't recall it following in recent times. In fact, in recent times, he has proven to be, when it comes to wrestling, a very good defensively, surprisingly good scrambler. He maintains, for the most part, pretty good cardiovascular conditioning. So, I wonder if at the time we were observing something about Sean O'Malley that may have been true at that time, but he kind of had a sense was not a permanent condition and was really just a function of the moment. Subsequent to that, the facts have kind of borne that out. So, long story short, the way to answer that question for me is it doesn't really matter if Sean O'Malley tells himself the truth or not. None of that's relevant. What's relevant is what narrative gets the best out of him on Saturday night. And if that's a lie or any other thing, that's really its only functional value at this point.
That's true, man. And by the way, that fight was in 2020, and it feels like it was even longer than that. Both guys have improved a ton. Sean was still far away from fighting the Peter Yans of the division. Cheeto went on to knock out Frankie Edgar. Dom Cruz, particularly. The Sandhagen loss was a setback, but he bounced back against Pedro. Who do you think has improved more, is more better equipped in this rematch? And what does it come down to for you? Because Sean seems to expect to knock him out somewhat easily. It sounds like Cheeto expects his heart to persevere here.
So I think that I haven't looked at the odds. So I'm going to guess that O'Malley is a slight to moderate favorite, something along those lines. I don't know what they would be. If you see them, let me know. But the way I would answer that, do you have the number specifically?
I'm pulling him up right now. Let's have a look.
Yeah.
You go and I'll...
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay. Here we go. What do we got? Marlon Vera plus 210, Sean O'Malley 250, minus 258.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
That sounds about right. I mean, to me, since their last meeting, again, I have not seen consistent evidence of physical frailty or injury proneness that may have been plaguing him to some degree at that time. I simply have not seen it. That's the first thing I'd say. I think the second thing I'd say is the wins he's had since then. The Jan one, there's a fair degree of controversy about that, but look what he did to Aljamain Sterling. There's not much controversial about that, is there? I mean, he looked phenomenal doing it, and of course, any number of wins there and in between. He has risen to the occasion and consistently gotten better. You can rank him wherever you want in a various set of degrees or a various set of measurements for what makes a good striker. How good are they at selling feints? How powerful are they? How accurate are they? How good is their timing, setups, all that stuff? Dude, he ranks highly on a lot of those, and maybe at some of the very highest levels for things like timing. His timing is absolutely superb, and it's only gotten better since then. The Sterling fight is a perfect example of how he finished that with just phenomenal timing and good power as well. Like, he's really well equipped there, and I think he's demonstrated the most amount of growth technically and even physically to a degree since that last fight. Chito Vera, to me, has also improved. I don't think it'd be very foolish to think he has not. I don't think his game has grown in the same amount that O'Malley's has with that similar amount of time. However, I do think he's settled into a very good groove. I think a 5-round fight suits him very well. I think that Chito Vera, I'm going to be real about it, I think he has very good skill, but the thing that might really carry him, and I'm being dead serious about this, he might be the most durable guy in MMA. He is in contention for that. It's not, to me, a question of like whether Chito will lose the first 3 rounds. I suspect that he probably will, or 2 of the first 3, something like that. O'Malley will appear to be in control within the first 15 minutes. It's after that, to me, that the real fight begins. It's after that when Chito Vera really begins to get going. He is undeterred. He has an iron chin. It's not just that he takes a punch well to the body. He's like, the guy went the distance with John Lineker. Right? I mean, this dude can take a punch. He's got real known limits. Look what Corey Sandhagen was able to do in terms of wrestling him. He's got real known deficiency striking as well. He can be made to cover up and retreat. But a 4th and 5th round push for a very durable guy versus another guy who there is a fair degree of athleticism that powers that game and could be made to work through the course of it. It's a tale of 2 fights to the extent Vera can take it there. That's really, to me, the sort of central conflict of this fight between them. It's not really, is Sean more talented? It's, is he more talented over 25 minutes? And I don't know the answer to that.
Good point, man. You're certainly redeeming yourself after the Sean Izzy analysis.
Can't get much worse. Can't get much worse.
This I would say feels like either a bit of a stepping stone for Sean's career, or if he loses, like a massive setback. So there is a lot on the line. I am curious about your take on Sean's marketability, because Aljo obviously spoke about how the pay-per-view numbers for their pay-per-view weren't all that high. I personally think Sean's amazing to watch. I like his personality. I think that like he just seems like a genuinely good dude, and he says a lot of stuff, and he's honest about, when he's nervous or what he thinks or his likelihood to win a fight. I like that. But we're in this like almost lull period of the sport. We're looking for the next star. Sean is meant to be it. He doesn't have the sound bites of a Conor McGregor. His trash talk sometimes can be a little bit non-committal. So I'm trying to figure out what you think is like the most marketable thing about him. There's also this, notion that like, hey, Sean's colorful personality and style is like awesome, but it also markets to, say, a younger demographic, some that may not even be buying pay-per-views. So I'm wondering what you think Sean's ceiling is a star, and what do you think his path is if he's going to be a big star? Is it with his personality, trash talk, or is it more about, more Aljo-like performances where he's just, beating guys in a round and then, on the highlight reels?
Yeah, I mean, something interesting has happened with his popularity. So when he first started coming through the Contender Series and really, really early into his UFC run, pre-Cheeto, first fight, like before that, I talked to some folks who had some access to some numbers, and they indicated that when he fought, in any kind of digital platform, that there was a clear spike in numbers, especially on the Contender Series, the first fight after the Contender Series, I think it was. There was a clear spike, and I do think he was standing out. He was making a name. He had an exciting skill set. The Contender Series was still it's still a very valuable product. But it has turned a little bit more into a factory versus a very select forum for the excellent or something, and a little bit of prestige rust, I would say. But during that time, I do think he was making a name for himself and had done quite well. He had the setback against Cheeto, and I think some other ones. Again, the having to sit out for a while because of USADA didn't help things. And I'm not sure where along the way it kind of turned for him a little bit. Where, please make no mistake, the guy has a successful online YouTube property and a digital presence that the metrics are all very high. He is obviously a champion. He's very young. I think he's the second youngest champion in the UFC, something like that. So there's a lot of factors going in his way, but somehow the public kind of turned from, hey, sort of kind of the way I see him, which is the stuff he does for me? No, it doesn't work for me, but it doesn't have to. Here's a guy who is just sort of living out a life, very dedicated to his own choices. And, that's just the way, that's a thing that people do, and I accept it and it doesn't bother me. You know what I mean? But some people have turned that into him as a try-hard. Like he's just trying too hard for some of these things, and that's caught up with him a little bit, I think, reputationally. And now there's a little bit of distance that you begin to see between himself and the public. But that can all be overcome. If you continue to win big, the stature and the significance of what he means to the sport will rise. And then this is really the last ingredient. He needs a rival. He needs a really big rival. He needs somebody that people want to see him against continuously. If Cheeto ends up winning, and it's an exciting, thrilling comeback, right? Which is the kind of fight I think if Cheeto's going to win, it's probably going to be a comeback. If he actually has one of those and comes back, and then there's this now rivalry, that does something for him. But also just winning 2, 3, 4 more fights, which is very hard to do, I get. But that kind of thing sort of naturally solves all of these other various challenges that he's encountered.
Are you surprised that he's not on UFC 300? I mean, it's just one event away.
Dude, this card bangs. Like,
yeah, I think they just needed someone. I think they just figured we'll figure out 300, but we need someone now.
Well, they wanted to load 300, but it's kind of clear after the fact is, one, they had some difficulty doing it, but also in the end there was some limitations on how much they could load it. Like, putting 3 title fights always becomes risky about time and how long the broadcast can drag and whatnot. And do you even have enough? So they kind of snuck in the BMF there, which gives them only the other 2 weight class titles they have to worry about, and that gives them one to use for $299 or any other purpose, however you look at the numbers. But dude, this is great. I have been accused over the course of my career at times for being unnecessarily negative about various things the UFC does. I will tell you, I don't really have complaints about this card. I don't love every fight equally or something like that, but these questions about Sean O'Malley, he should be headlining a pay-per-view. This is a fantastic card in a key, growing, somewhat of a new market-ish, in the scope of history. This is an important assignment for a headliner. It's not 300, but there you have to share it with everyone else. Here he gets to stand out and really support in a very kind of important way. I don't know what kind of pay-per-views it will sell. I do think he has some star power that has to be built before he's really in some mega territory, but this is all good news and great for everybody. I think everyone wins out of this.
It's a sexy fight card. Definitely here to get your nipples hard. I want to switch over with no segue whatsoever to Dustin Poirier and Benoit Saint-Denis. Dude, it's an interesting fight, man. But when you look at the matchmaking, right? BSD, he's jumping way up from number 11. Dustin, he's also been quite clear about the fact that he doesn't really want to fight the up and coming guys. Guys like, say, Benoit, and he's kind of done everything at this point in the sport other than hold, the undisputed belt. Do you think that the UFC have kind of thrown in BSD as almost like a bit of a punishment for that stance? Like, all right, well, you don't really know what you want to do. You don't want to fight, the Benoits and this and that. Also, sorry, my phone. Fuck's sake. Fuck me. Yeah, they're just kind of like, oh, you don't want to fight these guys. We're going to throw you number 11. And also kind of like try and make the most out of Dustin as he is kind of in this latter stage of his career, as a lot of the lightweights. What do you think, Luke?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is this. It's like...
Because I'm looking at it and it's like what is there for Dustin to win here? You know what I mean?
Right. The guy finished Justin Gaethje. I know he'd lost recently, but this is on his resume. He finished Justin Gaethje, he finished Michael Chandler, and he finished Eddie Alvarez. It's like... And you beat Conor McGregor twice. It's like, dude, Dustin. I know he was the interim champ, but my point is this: for someone who never held a undisputed UFC weight class title, Dustin Poirier's career is basically as good as it gets.
Yeah.
I mean, he right at the limit. He is a highly respectable talent. But I mean, did you just have to look at the promoter here, and the promoter gets to make the fights? This is a thing that you might like. You might like that the UFC is able to exert this much control over everything. You may not. It's going to be a matter of personal preference. But the point I'm trying to make here is, this kind of fighter at this age in boxing would probably not take a fight like this. It is, in my judgment, you always have to ask, what is the promoter trying to achieve by creating a matchup like this? And sometimes there is no narrative. They just owe two guys fights. They're available, done deal. This one to me feels like there's really big hype behind BSD and some big belief that he could be a big star in the French market. He is still in his 20s. He really just sort of entering his prime. He's got a cool story. He is a action fighter, if ever there was one. The best of what Dustin Poirier, this is the promoter logic, right? The promoter logic would be the best of what Dustin Poirier's had to offer has now, in all likelihood, expired. There could be a couple of inspired moments going forward, but in general, whatever the best work he was going to do, that's probably now behind us. So to me, it's not really a question about whether or not they're trying to cash out Dustin Poirier or something. Are they doing it punitively? I don't know, but any promotion that's sort of working with this many, they have all of the world's talent, right? They have every card to play. If you have that kind of resources and you're not booking fights like this, you're doing something wrong. I'd actually kind of expect them to. It's painful to watch, or at least at a bare minimum, it's concerning for fans who sometimes feel like they're stars. You don't really ever want them to age or to take tough fights, but we all know the score. This is a game that feeds the elderly to the young, and it's brutal and it's awful and you hate it. And by the way, Poirier could win. I mean, I'm not disputing that fact. I'm merely pointing out the promoter logic here seems pretty clear.
Speaking of the matchup, man, how do you rank, or how do you sort of stack BSD against Dustin? Interesting as well that BSD just won with a head kick, and Dustin is coming off that brutal head kick KO loss. Do you think that's going to be sort of in the back of his mind at all as he's going in here?
I think that there's really a high degree of probability you're going to get a situation where this fight goes potentially a little longer than we might expect. I would not be surprised if this one goes late into the second and even into the third. I'd be surprised if it doesn't get finished. But I wouldn't be surprised if it goes, well into that territory. And the reason why I say that is because I feel like what you're going to get here is, again, high degree of probability that what you're going to get is a Dustin Poirier who can find, with his long jab, powerful striking, good counter striking, great veteran experience. He's going to find a way to get an ultra aggressive BSD tagged. I expect him to get hit. I expect him to get hurt and potentially even rocked and more. The thing that makes BSD stand out is, one, he is an incredible conditioning and has a really animal style approach to this constant aggression. But more than that, I want you to, when you watch any highlights on him, if you guys review footage this week, one thing I really want you to pay attention to is watch the aggressiveness with which he scrambles. It's hard to explain, but there are certain guys who have a degree of intensity positionally that makes up every little time they do that. They get a little bit of a small victory, whether it's a positional win or I get to my feet first win or something. But the accumulated total of all those wins over the course of a fight are astronomically high, and they get exponential. What I mean by that is the more someone brings that kind of intensity to a match, the more they begin to wither other people. It is an inevitability. And dude, he brings that kind of a thing. He marries it with fight-ending power and good kickboxing, and now you see him beginning to work in and out of ranges and begin to have weapons for each of those ranges. I feel like in the end, it's not that we think BSD is invincible, but rather that he is, in a circumstance like this, a high degree of probability, potentially inevitable, right? Just overwhelming force in the end through all the different phases. But his intensity is really, it's not a replacement of skill, but as a complement to it, dude, he's terrifying.
100%. Dude, this fight has violence written all over it, so that's why I'm super excited about it. We don't have a ton of time. So,
also, not to bring up a sore subject, but remember, we haven't even talked about this. I didn't mention it. Poirier coming off of the head kick. You mentioned it, but we haven't really sort of. Poirier's coming off that head kick loss. Now, again, every fighter's different. Every situation really can be different in all different kinds of ways. But, Volk coming off of a head kick loss, he was not necessarily the same. Here, Dustin, by the way, 35 years of age. This is not a title fight, so the statistics don't apply as ruthlessly. But nevertheless, these are factors to consider as well that BSD has in his favor that have nothing to do with the actual complexion of how they'll match up.
35. Yeah, I know Dustin was like super young back in the day when he got into it, but like Jesus Christ, he's accomplished so much, and for him to only be 35 is just crazy. But that actually ties in nicely. And we'll let you go soon because we are running low on time. But age-wise, dude, I'm excited for MVP's UFC debut against Kevin Holland. But the reality is, though, man, 36 years old, like it's almost pointless to us, but has MVP come to the UFC too late? And like, really, what do you expect from his UFC career trajectory to, even be at this point? Like, what is the UFC hoping for best case scenario? They've signed him, probably paying him pretty well. Kevin's a great first step because it's going to be a fun stand-up fight. But wrestlers, you could argue they don't currently have the stranglehold on the division. Like they used to. You got more strikers, guys like Ian, guys like Jack, who we'll talk about in a second. Shovcut, but Shovcut's got, deadly grappling, Leon. So in some ways, it's a good time for MVP, but like 36 years old, man. Dude, the time is now, or should I say the time was yesterday. Like, what are you expecting his success to be in the UFC?
I think limited, but still valuable. And what I mean by that is, he doesn't, I think it's just very foolish to go into this situation and think, oh, is a title shot possible? Would not rule it out, but I really don't think that's the likeliest outcome of either this fight or any subsequent fights. I just don't think we get there with him. I think that window has probably closed. However, he does have an interesting style, and to the extent that he can be matched up appropriately to get the most action out of that, that could be valuable for him. That could be valuable for any potential opponent. That could be valuable for the UFC in the. We've seen MVP pull already in the UK market, and getting potentially some UFC shine to put even more on that could be great for all the parties involved as well. There's a few different ways where, hey man, I'm not expecting you to necessarily win every one of these, although winning would be part of it. But if you can reliably just deliver fun-ass fights, like, hey, dude, MVP, UFC style, remember what he did against Kevin Holland? He put him against somebody else, and then that one's a raver. You're like, okay, this is we can do something with this. That, to me, seems very much on the table. I have very, very managed expectations for this whole thing, and I think if you do that, all he can do is let him over-deliver before we worry about anything else. You know what I mean?
Yeah, good, solid point, man. I'm looking forward to the smooth striking on display in this one. Speaking of smooth striking, the only thing smooth and striking should be your balls, fellas. And our good friends at Manscaped can help get you there with the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. It is the cheat code for every man to look good, feel good, and turn the page on confidence this year. We're talking about expectations. Your expectations should be sky high for your boys downstairs. And the MVP of 2024, Lawnmower 5.0, it can get you there. It is not just a trimmer, it is your grooming sidekick, equipped with 2 skin-safe blade heads, a standard one for taking a little off the top, and a new foil blade to go smooth wherever your heart desires. It is literally like having a personal ball stylist follow you around wherever you go, or at least waiting for you in the shower so you can kick off the day or the morning with it, because it's also waterproof. And if you want to go the full experience, you can get the Manscaped Performance Package 5.0. In this grooming kit, you get the trusted lawnmower itself, Manscaped's ear and nose hair trimmer, and essential aftercare products with the Crop Soother Ball Aftershave Lotion and Crop Preserver Anti-Chafing Ball Deodorant. Imagine that. Deodorant, just specifically for your boys downstairs. You also get free gifts, the Boxers 2.0 to keep your smooth boys nice and cool and protected, and the Shed 2.0 toiletry bag for free. We've been using ours literally for years. Isn't that right, Dennis?
That's right, man. Everything you need. Support yourself, support the show, and use the code word submission. Get 20% off and free shipping today. That's code word submission, 20% off and free shipping today at Manscaped. Change your life for the better, thanks to Manscaped. But Luke, before we wrap up, we want to talk to you about this Jack Dela taking on Gilbert Burns. Man, it's interesting, and we saw it even on the Embedded, the first episode, where Usman's like, you got this young crop of guys coming in trying to take out some of the veterans. But yeah, you've got, Jack, and he's a part of this new exciting group of young welterweights, guys like Shovcut and Ian Gary. And it's a big one against Gilbert, who's been here and done it. He's done everything except win the belt. He's 37. He's coming off a bad shoulder injury. He can bang. He's deadly on the ground. Do you think Jack can get it done here? And this is also a Jack that's coming off 2 split decisions. And he admitted to us at WWE Elimination Chamber that he needs a big win here. And while Jack needs this, Gilbert's coming off a loss to Bilal and really needs to win if he wants to stay in the title picture. So big fight for both guys.
Yeah, I think Jack absolutely can get it done. One more time, this is not a UFC title fight, but going back to the 35 sort of measurement here, this is 27 in Jack Dela Maddalena versus 37 in the case of Gilbert Burns. No, but I think this is a real who's coming or going moment, right? So that Jack's really going to have to rise to the occasion against a guy like Gilbert, experienced, as you mentioned, phenomenal jiu-jitsu, at a bare minimum can marry it quite well with wrestling, and more to the point, his striking has come a long way. I spoke to him, did an interview with him. He told me he had to go get stem cells in order to repair a shoulder. So he's been out for a long time, but he's lost time in that whole sort of scenario here where, again, he just hasn't been as active as he would hope. So for Jack, very quickly, I think he can get it done. This is going to be a blood and guts kind of affair, but he's really going to have to be decisive with taking the lead in the striking department, putting Gilbert Burns on his heels. And what I would say is Jack Dela Maddalena, one of these guys in the conversation about who's got some of the better MMA boxing in the UFC. And one thing that really has been getting better about him, good combination work, much better takedown defense, which he's going to need in this one. And then last but not least, his overall defensive responsibility or his overall defensive prowess, I guess was the best way to put that, has really grown in leaps and bounds. You can see him beginning to really smooth out a style and a system that works for him. But Gilbert Burns is a tough customer. This is a real gut check moment. I can't wait for this one.
Yeah, and speaking of exciting Jack Dela fights, if he does get it done, he told me in Casper he wants Shavkat in a 5-round potentially, or maybe a 3-round in Perth in August. What do you think about that?
Who's calling out Shavkat these days?
That's his dream fight. That's what he wants.
Yeah. I mean, I know that they probably won't do it right now because they don't want a contender to eliminate another guy. But I mean, these are the fights that we beg for. Jack Dela Maddalena, who has in a world where he's beaten Gilbert Burns and then he goes for Shavkat, Jesus Christ. I mean, what more can you say about that? That's the whole reason why we watch fights, shit like that.
Big balls, man. And a lot of stakes on this weekend's card, man. Everybody's kind of, you mentioned the coming or going. It seems like that in almost every fight. So some juicy prelims as well. All right, guys, make sure to follow the man at L Thomas News on Twitter and at Luke Thomas News IG. Check out Morning Combat and all their excellent coverage leading up to UFC 299. Luke, always a pleasure, man. I feel like you redeemed yourself. Not that you even needed to. Excellent analysis as always, man.
I don't come buying gambling. Don't come here looking for gambling advice. But I'm glad I got a chance to come back. Enjoy the fights, boys. Thank you for having me.